All right, now joining me for what's become an annual visit. This is his seventh visit to Philly Pressbox Radio. If you're scoring at home, it's Fred Barnett. Hey, Fred, how you doing?
Hey man, what's going on? Thanks for having me. How you guys
Uh,
doing?
Doing
Well, how
all
are you
right.
doing?
I'm doing great. Great to see you. Great to see you after a good game last night for the Eagles. It started out like the infamous Joe Webb game from 11 years ago when the Eagles
Okay.
lost to the Vikings on a Tuesday night. Yeah, I know, some bad memories there. But things turned out pretty well after that for the Birds after the mistake-filled first quarter. 27-17 win over visiting Washington. Jalen Hurts actually having maybe his best game after that first quarter. What did you think of the play of the quarterback?
That was pretty good. Of course, it was good enough. They came away with a win, and in my opinion, I think they beat a team that they were supposed to beat. And that's big for I think any team in the NFL. Not losing to those teams that you feel like you have the most talent. And of course, with the COVID situation, they had guys out. I'm not sure exactly how many guys came back because of the game. Because the game being moved to Tuesday. But I think that the Eagles should have won this game, and of course they did. But the quarterback play was good. Of course, we had a turnover here and there, and the offense kind of sputtered in the first quarter, but came out in the second quarter and made some plays, which was kind of put them over the hump and came away with a win.
Well, speaking of Jalen Hurts, he's going to be watched pretty closely over these final 3 or 4 games here. Do you think he is the quarterback of the future? Is he a guy they can count on, for the next several years, do you think, or don't we know yet?
I don't think we know yet, and I say that from my perspective. It's easy, I think, for fans to just kind of add up the numbers and just see the plays. From being once on the inside, I really understand what an offensive coordinator or a head coach looks at, and that is how consistent he is in making right decisions. And you find that out by watching the film. You find that out by being in the film room and knowing, how he grades out. And we saw a couple of touchdowns, and we saw a couple of turnovers, but if he grades out at 60, he may not be the guy. If he grades out at 85 or more or better, and in his completion and him assessing the field, reading the defense, he grades out higher. So that's something that we kind of, as fans on the outside looking in, don't really know. It's hard for me to say. Of course, he made some good plays. He scored twice. Made a good throw in the end zone, for them to kind of go ahead and win the game. But it's hard to say. Of course he played well enough, and I think just from the outside looking in, it seems that he is in this college mode that he was in, of course, in college, and every position is a transition when you're coming from college to pro. You can't take that same personality, that same type of play, and at the professional level. And for me, I think there has to be more of a transition from that college quarterback to a professional quarterback. And can he do it? Oh, it's possible. Will he do it? We'll see.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we're all pretty happy about is what's going on with the Eagles running game. I'm going to put this up on the screen, courtesy NBC Sports Philadelphia. Over the
Yeah.
last 7 games, they're averaging more than 200 yards on the ground. They've had, in fact, 5 200-yard plus games. That is pretty impressive.
Yeah, yes, it's very impressive, and it's confusing too because I'm dumbfounded why they ran the ball less than 5 times against the Dallas Cowboys. And if I'm correct, I think it was 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it was
And
crazy.
they averaged about 9 yards a carry. So I think I think that's great, but at the same time too, I think that should be evidence for their coaching staff to understand that they need to run the ball more.
Yeah, I think they've learned that lesson, hopefully, anyway. What about the wide receivers? I guess as a former wide receiver yourself, you probably watch them pretty closely. What are
Yeah.
your early impressions of Devontae Smith? He made a great catch last night. He's been up and down this year, but there's certainly a lot of talent there.
Yeah, he's kind of been up and down, but as you say, there's a lot of talent there with Rager. I mean, of course, he's coming off somewhat of a disappointing game against the Giants with dropping a couple of passes. But Smith looks great. Ward looks, of course, had a great catch in the corner of
Yeah.
the end zone. I think they have the talent. I think, of course, it's going to come down to play calling and number one, putting the ball on him, and making his right reads, going through his progressions and getting them the ball. I think they really do have the talent. And at this point, with all that they've been through, when we think about some of the teams that they lost to, and they should have won, and they still could possibly be in the playoffs. So going to the playoffs in the NFL is a hard thing to do, and for them to be in this position, this late, and with what they've gone through, I think it's a tribute to what could potentially happen with this team.
Yeah, they started off 2-5, then 5-2 over the last 7 games, so they are at
Yeah.
500 now for the first time since week 2. Now it gets a little tougher, though. In addition to playing last night, they got a couple of games over the next week and a half, really. Sunday against the Giants in Philly, and then the following week back down to Washington to play the Washington football team before
Yeah.
finishing up at home against Dallas. They may have to win all 3. 2 out of 3 may get it done. How do you see this playing out for the Birds?
I think they have a chip on their shoulder with the Giants. So if the Giants come in here and beat them, I think it'll be a disgrace. When they did play the Giants, I feel like the Giants says, "Oh, thank God you guys played worse than we did,"
Yeah.
and that's the only way they won that game. But you got to have a chip on your shoulder with the Giants because that's a team that you should have beat. They basically tried to give you the game, you wouldn't take it. And of course, with the Redskins, I think they based on what they did last night, they should be pretty confident in going down to Washington. Dallas is a whole nother story. I think Dallas is somewhat, of course, in control with the NFC East. It could be a game where, possibly, depending on what happens between now and then, that Dallas maybe rest some guys and because of course they're going to the playoffs. So, head to head against Dallas, I'm not quite sure, but, any given Sunday.
Hey, I want to ask you about the coach. When Nick Sirianni was first introduced, people weren't very impressed. He had a very horrendous debut news conference, to be honest. He had some questionable coaching decisions early on. People wanted to run him out of town. All of a sudden, he's looking pretty good. The play calling's gotten better. He seems more confident. What do you think of Nick?
The play calling has gotten better, and that's the way it's supposed to go. I mean, you're supposed to kind of get comfortable as things goes. And you're right. When I saw that first interview, I thought it was some sort of prank, to tell you the truth. And he seemed a little nervous. The first thing I thought of was that our team back in the 90s, if they would have saw that interview of our coach coming in, we would have kind of been looking at each other like, are we serious? Is this guy going to lead us? But, as you go throughout the season, you realize, some things that you need to make, some changes that you need to make, of course, to make your team better and to be successful. And I think he has shown that he's willing to, make changes and do whatever it takes to, make this team successful. And, they're on the path of possibly going to the playoffs if they can either win, 2 of the last 3 or possibly all 3.
Yeah. Going to be interesting. Hey, let me ask you something else. Jim Harbaugh and the Ravens, twice in the last 3 weeks, rather than kick an extra point that would have tied the game and probably sent it into overtime, went for a 2-point conversion to, take the lead or maybe win the game in the final half minute. Instead of playing for overtime, they failed both times. What is your thought process on that? Did he do the right thing, being aggressive, or do you play for overtime?
Well, he failed both times, so that's pretty simple. That's pretty simple. I mean, you got to take what you can get. There's no way I would. I mean, I totally understand it. I totally understand, him being aggressive, but at the same time, too, I think when you tie the game up, you kind of shift momentum. Now here we come. and I think that if, of course, if he had to do it over again, he wouldn't go for it. But it's it's a chance you take, and we would be congratulating him and praising him if he had made those 2 points conversions. So unfortunately, it put him in a bad situation.
Yeah, hindsight is certainly 2020.
Yeah.
Hey, Fred, when you were with the Eagles, you of course played at Veterans Stadium, all your home games there, and that wonderful AstroTurf. What do you think of
Oh
when someone mentions the Vet?
gosh, the Stray Cats. And you know what? We were talking about. I was in Lincoln Financial's suite last night. We actually started talking about the Vet, and I was telling them how we, even during the game, we knew where like the turf was like uneven, and there are times when I would line up. I come out of huddle and line up, and I'm looking for the uneven spots on the turf just to make sure I don't trip over. And I mean, when you, oh God, I'm so glad they're not playing, in Veterans Stadium. And we also talked about some of the injuries that had happened in the vet. I mean, Michael Irvin.
Yep.
A lot of people don't realize Wendell Davis from the Chicago Bears tore both ACLs in the vet, and I remember Coach Billick. They came down to play a preseason game, and he looked at the turf and he said, "We're not playing on this," and they didn't play the game. And of course, things have gotten a lot better, but there were a lot of memories that came from that stadium. A lot of crazy fans. Like, our fans are still crazy, but they're not as disruptive and violent as they used to be years ago. But there's so many memories in the vet. It just takes me back and just, boy, it really like riles up those times when, there were so many games against the Cowboys, and of course, the NFC East, the Giants. We've had a lot of great memories in that vet.
It was a dump, but it was our dump, as they say.
Yes, it was.
Hey, Fred, I heard tell us your story visit with our pals Ray and Glenn on WIP a couple of months back. And I didn't know this, but you were apparently a pretty darn good basketball player back in the day.
Yes. I had a couple of junior college scholarships, a few junior college scholarships, actually. And I only played the 1 year in high school. So I played 2 years and 2 years of basketball in high school, and I averaged like 18 points. And it was really my love. And, my way of just kind of measuring out really what I wanted to do, because I had more basketball scholarships than football scholarships, was that, I just kind of looked at long term and what I thought, which sport I thought I could be successful in. And of course, I chose football. But basketball was my love. Basketball was a love of mine. And as of recently, I guess about 6-7 years ago, I had a minor back surgery. And before that back surgery, I dunked a basketball for the last time in my life. And I'm going to tell you something, I got emotional because I knew at that point, my doctor was like, I probably wouldn't play basketball anymore. And I'm like,
yeah.
How oh my gosh, I know I can't play. Of course, I can't play football anymore, but basketball, of course, is a pickup game, but can't do it anymore. And it was definitely a love of mine for sure.
Fred, on past visits, we talked about Buddy Ryan, of course, and the infamous Rich Kotite years. I don't think I ever asked you about Ray Rhodes, though. You were there for the first year of the Ray Rhodes era, and he was known for giving some fiery speeches and, being, pretty demonstrative in the locker room. What do you remember about Ray Rhodes that one season you were there?
Exactly what you just said. I'm not going to be specific. Yeah, Ray was a great coach, man. Of course, we had John Gruden there as well, who was the offensive coordinator at the time. So that was, it was interesting because I think when he came in, that they had a mindset of transitioning as well, because they were kind of assessing us that first year. And of course, Randall didn't come back. I didn't come back. And I think he had Calvin for another year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
But it was an interesting time because I think a lot of guys, including myself, thought that, okay, don't think I'm fitting here, and of course, the next year I was in Miami. Urban Fryer was here, came here. I went to Miami. But Ray was a explosive, defensive coach, a no nonsense guy. I tell you just like it is, and great coach though.
Hey, Fred, before we wrap up, can I get you to tell us about your couple of seasons with the great Jim McMahon? I know you've told the story with Ray and Glenn. You have a particular story about Jim and his devotion to learning the offense during team meetings.
Yes. Oh, goodness gracious. Jim, Jim, I told someone last night, actually, out of all the quarterbacks I played with, you were talking Dan Marino, Randall Cunningham, Rodney Peete. These guys are, can throw the ball pretty good. Jim was the one guy that put the ball exactly where it needed to be, the exact speed that it needed to be at. He couldn't throw the ball, 70 yards down the field. But, those intermediate routes, the out routes, the corner routes, the dig routes, the in routes, the ball is exactly where it needed to be. But yeah, Jim was funny as heck. He just that little story that I told about, him being so devoted in the meeting room and going through the playbook. I was sitting in the back of the meeting room, and of course, I know the plays, and we're going through the same thing that we always go through. And I happened to look up, and it was his first year there. And I look up, and he's like going through the playbook, and this overwhelming feeling hit me that, man, here's a guy that has won a Super Bowl. And he's really like honing in on what we're doing here. And I feel like I need to do the same thing. So I felt a little guilty, and I wanted to come, get close to him. And I went out the back of the meeting room and came up in the front where he was. And I sat beside him and I said, hey, man, I want to thank you because you just encouraged me right now as you going through the playbook. And I know you know the plays. He knew the plays. I want to thank you because you encouraged me to really like pay attention and stay on point. And he looked at me and was like, what are you talking about? And it was, and I looked in his book and there was a magazine, in his book. I'm not going to tell you what kind of magazine it was.
Oh, I heard. It was like a Playboy type magazine.
But it was an entertainment magazine.
Yes,
and,
entertainment.
Yeah, what a great guy though, man. What a great guy. What great times we had back then.
Absolutely. Well, Fred, this has been great. Tell everybody what you going on. I know you're in Bermuda much of the time. You're in some business ventures. What do you have happening these days?
Yeah, I got a little business venture going on. I'm part of a whiskey distribution down in Bermuda, and I'm working on actually cigars. But most of the time, I'm working for my wife, and she's there she is over there, making sure she hears me. She has a corporate event. She has a corporate event planning company, and in Bermuda, and does a lot of work for Bacardi, and also does some interior design work for them as well. So we're having a great time in Bermuda. We probably going to be there for a few years. So we're just kind of in and out of Philly, but love coming back and love, of course, love doing shows with you and love getting back when we can.
All right. That's awesome. Well, Merry Christmas to you and your family, and we'll do it again next year, Fred.
Let's do it. Merry Christmas.